We spend our lives preparing for external battles. We learn how to navigate difficult colleagues, how to hedge against economic shifts, and how to protect ourselves from the whims of fate. Yet, in the quiet moments of the night, we are forced to confront a more devastating truth. The most dangerous adversary we will ever face is not waiting in an office or a boardroom. It is the one inhabiting our own skin. We are our own worst enemies, not because we lack talent or opportunity, but because we lack sovereignty over our own minds. We sabotage our progress through procrastination, drown our potential in self-doubt, and trade our long-term peace for short-term impulses. We allow our imaginations to create monsters out of simple inconveniences, suffering more in thought than we ever do in reality. This internal friction isn't just an annoyance, it is a leak in the hull of our character that eventually sinks the ship. But what if you could declare a ceasefire? Ancient Stoicism offers a radical departure from the modern obsession with fixing the world. It teaches us that while we cannot control the cards we're dealt, we have absolute authority over how we play the hand. To stop being your own enemy is to reclaim the inner citadel, that fortress of reason where no external force can enter without your permission. If you're ready to stop the internal war and start building a life of unshakable purpose, subscribe now. Together, we'll turn ancient logic into a modern edge. The central tragedy of the human condition is not that we are subject to the whims of fate, but that we are so often the primary architects of our own suffering. We walk through life wearing armour against the world, yet we keep a dagger pressed against our own ribs. This is the tyranny of the internal critic, a relentless, subjective narrator that distorts reality, magnifies pain, and shackles our potential. To the Stoic, this isn't just a psychological quirk, it is a fundamental error in reasoning that leads to a life of slavery. In Stoic philosophy, the enemy is never the person who insulted you, the job you lost, or the body that is failing. Those are external facts, indifference. The true enemy is the internal critic that takes those facts and weaves a tapestry of misery around them. This self-sabotage manifests primarily through two catastrophic vices of thought. 1. Judgment over reality. The map is not the territory. The first way we act as our own worst enemy is by confusing our opinions with facts. We are rarely upset by what actually happens. We are upset by the story we tell ourselves about what happened. This is what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "Everything is opinion." Consider a simple event. A friend does not reply to your text message. The reality. A digital sequence was sent. No sequence is returned. The internal critic. They're ignoring me. I must have said something wrong. Our friendship is shallow. I am unlikable. In this moment, you're no longer living in reality. You're living in a horror movie of your own production. You have granted your assent to a false impression. By layering these value judgments, this is bad, this is unfair, this is a disaster, over neutral events you create emotional turbulence where there should be calm. You become a victim not of the world, but of your own interpretations. You are quite literally hallucinating your own misery. 2. The illusion of control. Tilting at windmills. The second vice is our obsession with the externals. We are like a sailor who ignores the rudder of his own ship because he is too busy screaming at the wind to change direction. This is the ultimate form of self-sabotage, the misallocation of our most precious resource, our attention. We burn hours of mental energy agonizing over what our co-workers think of us, the political climate, the mistakes we made 10 years ago, the traffic on the way to a meeting. The Stoic dichotomy of control teaches us that there is a hard line between what belongs to us and what does not. Our opinions, our intentions, our desires, and our aversions, these are ours. Everything else, our bodies, our property, our reputation, the actions of others, is not. When you tie your happiness to things you cannot control, you are handing the remote control of your soul to a stranger. You become a puppet, as the Stoics described, pulled by the invisible strings of hope and fear. You're your own enemy because you have abandoned your post at the only place you actually have power, your own mind, to go fight losing battles in the outside world, the cost of the internal war. The result of these two vices is a state of perpetual pathos, unhealthy passion. We become reactive. If the world is kind, we are happy. If the world is cruel, we are devastated. This dependency is the very definition of a worst enemy relationship. You have betrayed yourself by making your well-being conditional on a world that owes you nothing. By indulging the internal critic, we lose our autarkia, self-sufficiency. We become experts at finding the cloud in every silver lining and the insult in every compliment. We procrastinate because we fear the judgment we've already levelled against ourselves. We stay in toxic situations because we believe the critic when it says we deserve no better. To stop being your own enemy, you must first recognise that the critic's voice is not your voice. It is merely a set of conditioned reflexes and faulty logic. The problem isn't that life is hard, it's that we have empowered an internal tyrant to interpret that hardness as a personal failing. To stop being your own enemy, you must undergo a fundamental shift in identity. You must move from being a reactor, a leaf blown about by the winds of emotion and circumstance, to being a governor. In the Roman sense, a governor was not someone who controlled every citizen's move, but someone who maintained order and law within their jurisdiction. Your jurisdiction is your mind. The Stoics anchored this transformation in the concept of prohairesis. Often translated as moral character or reasoned choice, prohairesis is the faculty of the mind that distinguishes humans from animals. An animal perceives a threat and runs. A human perceives a threat, pauses and asks, "Is this truly a threat to my character?" This faculty is your inner citadel. It is a fortress within the soul that no army can besiege, no critic can insult, and no economic collapse can crumble, unless you voluntarily open the gates. Building this citadel is not a matter of wishful thinking. It is a rigorous engineering project of the spirit. It requires 3 specific structural reinforcements. 1. Practice objective representation, phantasia cataleptic. We are our own enemies because we are dramatic narrators. We take a spark and describe it as a forest fire. To build the citadel, you must learn the art of objective representation, stripping the world of its adjectives. In his Meditations, Marcus Aurelius famously practiced this by describing fine Falernian wine as merely grape juice, and a purple imperial robe as sheep's wool dyed with shellfish blood. He wasn't being a cynic. He was removing the glaze of value judgment that leads to irrational desire or fear. When you're acting as your own enemy, you use loaded language. I am a total failure because I lost this client. This traffic is ruining my entire day. She disrespected me and I can't stand it. The governor of the citadel strips this away. You replace the drama with a police report of the facts. The drama. My career is ruined because I messed up this presentation. The fact. I spoke for 20 minutes. I forgot 2 slides. 3 people asked questions I couldn't answer. By sticking to the facts, you deny your internal critic the adjective fuel it needs to burn you. When you describe things objectively, you realize that the event itself is neutral. Only your reaction is painful. The citadel stands firm because it refuses to be frightened by ghosts of its own making. 2. The dichotomy of control, the great filter. A fortress is only as strong as its gatekeeper. If the gatekeeper lets in every stray dog and travelling salesman, the fortress is no longer a sanctuary. The Stoic gatekeeper uses the dichotomy of control as the ultimate filter. Epictetus opened his Enchiridion with the most important distinction in human history. Some things are up to us, and some things are not up to us. We become our own enemies because we try to gatekeep things that are already inside or far outside the walls. To stop self-sabotage, you must ruthlessly categorize every stressor into one of 2 buckets. Bucket A, internals, up to us. Your opinions, your intentions, your desires, and your own labour. This is the only place where the words good or bad should ever be used. Bucket B, externals, not up to us. The weather, the past, the economy, your reputation, and the outcomes of your actions. These are indifferents. The self-saboteur spends $1,000 units of energy on bucket B and $0 on bucket A. They worry about the promotion, outcome, but show up late to work, action. The governor of the citadel flips the script. If a stressor is in bucket B, you meet it with the phrase, "This is nothing to me. This isn't coldness, it's efficiency." By letting go of the uncontrollable, you consolidate your power. You stop being your own enemy by refusing to fight wars on territory you don't own. 3. Voluntary hardship, stress testing. the walls. Finally, a citadel that has never been tested is just a decorative palace. We are often our own enemies because we're fragile. We have become so accustomed to comfort that a minor inconvenience, a slow internet connection, a cold room, a rude comment, feels like a life-threatening assault. Our impulses run the show because we're afraid of the slightest discomfort. The Stoics practiced ascesis, voluntary hardship, to prove to themselves that they are stronger than their circumstances. Seneca advised, "Set aside a certain number of days, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?'" When you voluntarily choose the harder path, you are training your inner governor. Take a cold shower. You prove to your body that unpleasant is not the same as unbearable. Fast for a day. You prove to your hunger that it does not dictate your mood. Speak your truth when it's awkward. You prove to your ego that social disapproval is not fatal. Through voluntary hardship, you take the weapons away from your internal critic. The critic tries to scare you with the prospect of poverty, failure, or discomfort. But if you have already slept on the floor and eaten plain bread by choice, the critic has no leverage over you. You have proven that your happiness is not a hostage to your comfort. The integration, the sovereign self. As these three practices take root, the development phase reaches its height. You begin to notice a space between a stimulus and your response. In that space lies your freedom. You no longer say, "I am angry." You say, "I am feeling a sensation of anger, but I, the governor of this citadel, will not grant it permission to dictate my actions." This is the moment you stop being your own enemy and start being your own most trusted ally. You have built a psychological infrastructure that converts raw experience into wisdom and obstacles into fuel. We reach the summit of the Stoic mountain not when we learn to tolerate our pain, but when we learn to love it. This is the radical turning point where the war against yourself ends in a total, unconditional peace treaty. It is the concept of amor fati, the love of fate. For most of our lives, we act as our own worst enemies because we are in a state of constant low-grade rebellion against reality. We live in the if-only shadow realm. If only I hadn't made that mistake. If only the economy were better. If only people treated me with the respect I deserve. This friction is the source of all self-sabotage. When you fight reality, you lose 100% of the time. You exhaust your spirit trying to rewrite a past that is written in stone and a future that hasn't yet been born. The moment of amor fati is the moment you stop wishing for a different life and realize that this life, with all its scars, setbacks, and failures, is the exact raw material you need for greatness. The death of the enemy. Being your own enemy is a luxury of the comfortable and the delusional. It requires the belief that things should have been easier. But when you embrace amor fati, you strip the internal critic of its primary weapon, the comparison between what is and what should be. If you embrace everything that happens to you as if you had chosen it yourself, who is there left to fight? If the disaster is actually a lesson, then the person who made the mistake is no longer a failure. They are a student. By accepting the present moment with a yes, you dismantle the internal judge. You realize that the enemy was merely a part of you that was terrified of the unknown, clinging to a version of reality that didn't exist. The alchemy of the obstacle. The Stoic peak is not about passive resignation. It is not saying, "Well, life is terrible and there's nothing I can do." That is nihilism, not Stoicism. Amor fati is an active, fiery embrace. It is the realization that the obstacle is the way. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Think of a fire. Everything you throw into a great fire becomes fuel for the fire. If you throw a bucket of water on a small flame, it goes out. But if you throw that same water onto a roaring furnace, it is hissed away into steam, and the fire burns hotter. When you practice amor fati, you become that furnace. The layoff isn't a career ender. It is the forced opportunity to start the business you were too afraid to launch. The heartbreak isn't a tragedy. It is the necessary pruning of a relationship that was stifling your character. The chronic pain isn't a curse. It is a daily training ground for patience and fortitude that a healthy person can never understand. In this climax of understanding, you see that your worst moments were actually your best moments in disguise. They were the moments that forced you to grow because comfort had made you stagnant. The great shift from mistake to mentor. The mistake you are currently dwelling on, the one that keeps you up at night, fueling your self-hatred, is not a stain on your record. In the light of amor fati, it is the exact, precise curriculum required for your evolution. If you had not failed, you would still be arrogant. If you had not been betrayed, you would still be naive. If you had not lost, you would not know the value of what you have. When you love your fate, you see that the universe is not conspiring against you. It is coaching you. It is providing the resistance necessary to build spiritual muscle. The climax of the Stoic journey is the realization that nothing can happen to you that is not for you. If it happened, it was necessary. If it is here, it is useful. The peace of the present. When you stop wishing for an easier future, you gain a superpower: presence. The enemy of the self is always either in the past, guilt, or the future, anxiety. Amor fati anchors you in the now. You stop looking over the fence at someone else's life and start cultivating your own garden with a ferocity and joy that was previously impossible. You're no longer your own worst enemy because you have finally taken your own side. You have accepted the hand of cards dealt by fate, not with a sigh, but with a grin. You realize that the game isn't about winning or losing the external prizes, but about how beautifully and bravely you play the cards you hold. The enemy has been integrated. The internal critic has been silenced by a simple, profound truth. This moment is enough. This life is enough. I am enough for this challenge. The transition from being your own worst enemy to becoming your own greatest ally is not a single event, but a continuous choice. It begins the moment you realize that your mind is a tool, not a master. For years you may have allowed your thoughts to run wild, treating every fleeting emotion as an absolute truth and every setback as a personal verdict. But the Stoic path offers a different way, the way of the self-architect. By applying the cold light of logic to your burning emotions and narrowing your focus strictly to your own actions, you dismantle the machinery of self-sabotage. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "How can I use this?" This shift transforms your internal landscape. The energy you once spent on guilt, anxiety, and the futile attempt to control the world is reclaimed. The Stoic way is frequently misunderstood as a pursuit of being emotionless, but the goal is actually much higher. It is to be unshakable. It is to feel the sting of life but remain upright, to feel the pull of impulse but remain governed by reason. When you finally call a ceasefire in the war against yourself, you don't become passive. Instead, you finally have the clarity and the energy to fight for the things that truly matter: your character, your purpose, and your contribution to the world. You're no longer the obstacle in your own path. You are the power that moves you forward. The war with yourself ends today, but the work of building your inner citadel never stops. If you're ready to stop being a spectator in your own life and start becoming its commander, you need more than just inspiration. You need a strategy. Here is how you join the ranks. Subscribe to the channel. Click the button to ensure you never miss a briefing on turning ancient wisdom into a modern edge. The 24-hour challenge. Identify one thing today that makes you angry or anxious. Ask yourself, is this in my control? If the answer is no, say out loud, this is nothing to me. Sound off. Drop a comment below with the one internal enemy you're committing to defeat this week. Whether it's procrastination, social anxiety, or a temper, name it to claim power over it. Don't just listen to these words. Embody them. The world has enough victims. It needs more governors.